Perfect people. Unattainable society living in a perfect steeple. Perfect people, life on a needle. High wire act living on the edge, almost lethal. Perfect people. Legalistic people, everything written down on an easel. Perfect people, life so legal. Face tightly stretched, looking like a weasel. Perfect people. Look at the walls you built, look at your cathedral. Perfect people, we know you hate the upheaval, but we're here to break you down. We'll try not to be too gleeful. Perfect people, make room for imperfect people. Pivot 613's where it's at, this is nothing illegal. Perfect people, no need to hire the paralegal. We're imperfect, love accepted just the way we are by the Savior.
No one's perfect, we're all flawed. We're made in greatness, but we're not God. Imperfections make us strong. They help us grow, learn right from wrong.
If you're going to put together a gold medal winning Olympic hockey team, where do you start? You look at the very best of the very best players and you put those pieces together, making sure you have good chemistry and well-rounded depth of experience. If you want to put a human on Mars, where do you start? You hire the best engineers and scientists, and they develop and they plan and they calculate. Now, if you want to send out a recon mission to take photos of enemy bases, photos that could help turn the tide of a war, where would you start? Well, you probably wouldn't start with Jay Zemer, because Jay Zemer was a bit of a misfit, kind of a screw-up, a guy you really wouldn't want to have on your team. Jay Zemer was a pilot for the B-26 bomber in the American Army Air Corps in World War II. Or he was sort of a B-26 pilot. Apparently he was a good pilot, but he could never fully pass the pilot tests. He seemed to have a bit of a problem figuring out how to land the B-26, which is kind of important. So he was relegated to being a co-pilot, but that bored him so much he would sleep through enemy engagements. His pilot was not amused, and he ended up being demoted to flying the B-17 as a fill-in navigator and occasional co-pilot. He was a decent guy, but no one wanted to fly with him. Despite not being fully cleared as a pilot for the B-17, he finally managed to volunteer for a dangerous reconnaissance mission over Japanese airspace, after the scheduled pilot fell ill. And through that, he discovered that he loved to fly the B-17 on recon missions, and he set his mind to doing that full-time. But he wasn't qualified to fly the B-17. He had no crew, and he had no plane. So what did he do? Well, he managed to solve his lack of a crew by starting to hang out with every misfit, renegade, and screw-up that he could find. The worst the Air Corps had to offer. The men nobody else wanted on their crew. But because they were all kind of in the same boat, unwanted and shunned, they figured out how to work together and forge themselves into an effective 8-man team. Because he saw potential where no one else had, now Jay Zemer had his crew. But he still needed a plane. Now, at the base that they were stationed at, an old B-17 had been parked in a field. It was in poor repair, and the Air Corps put it there so that it could be scavenged for parts. Captain Zemer saw his opportunity, and he and his crew took over the abandoned airplane. They managed to make it airworthy, and as a unit they slept in the aircraft to make sure that no one would abscond with their plane or take any of its parts. They made sure that everybody knew that they kept those .50 caliber machine guns on the airplane loaded, even at night, just in case anybody had any ideas about trying to seize the aircraft. So the crew had their plane. Now they were hungry to make a difference. They hung around the base operations center and volunteered for every mission that no other crew wanted to take on. They became known as the Eager Beavers. Their commanding officers ignored their misdeeds because it was handy having a nutty crew that would volunteer for just about any job. The Eager Beavers started tricking out their plane with custom modifications to suit their oddball style, turning their B-17 into sort of a Frankenstein aircraft with non-standard bits and pieces bolted on in weird places. And the Eager Beavers' reputation grew. Now, in 1943, the Air Corps needed a photo recon mission flown deep into Japanese territory, without any sort of escort. It was dangerous, had a low percentage chance of success. Of course, the eager beavers, they were up for it. They embarked on the mission, and they spotted the target airfield in the distance, and they could see dozens of enemy fighters taking off to come challenge them. The beavers tried to do what they could to defend themselves, but the B-17 got badly torn up by wave after wave of enemy fighters. Holes in the wings, front canopy was shattered, the hydraulics were cut. When the photos were finally complete, at last they could take evasive action. The battle to escape stretched on for 40 minutes. The Japanese pilots were sure that the B-17 was about to crash into the ocean. But all but one of the eager beavers managed to return to home base alive, although most of them came back with multiple serious injuries. Captain Zemer himself was so badly injured that, while laying on the floor of the cockpit, he had to coach another crew member to fly the plane home. And he spent most of the next year recovering in hospital. The photos they brought back were invaluable in planning the next phase of American military operations in that area. 2 of the eager beavers received the Congressional Medal of Honor, America's highest medal for valor in battle. The other members of the crew were awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest such award. This made that mission the most honored combat flight in U.S. history that didn't occur during a major battle. And it was performed by a team of screw-ups that no one else wanted. A band of rogues and misfits that were shunned from every other crew in the Air Force. So I ask you again, if you were wanting to piece together a gold medal hockey team, a group to put a human on Mars, or a crew to fly a dangerous but vital recon mission, where would you start? How about if you were setting out to change the world, to introduce people to a new way of connecting with God, to show them that the rules about how we relate to God had completely changed? If you wanted everyone across the globe to know that, how would you get started? Well, I wouldn't start with the fishermen. They smelled bad, they were dirty, they were rough and tumble, they were uneducated. Who's going to listen to them? And I wouldn't start with the tax collectors. Everyone hated them, and having them as part of my team would simply discredit the whole movement. And I certainly wouldn't have put this tax collector, a Roman sympathizer, on the same team as Simon the Zealot, known for his extremism against the Romans. Putting those two together is just asking for trouble. But that's what Jesus did. He formed his crew of initial followers from the lowest of the low and expected to work through them to accomplish his mission of changing the world. Mark chapter 1 verses 16 to 20 in the New Living Translation says this. One day as Jesus was walking along the shore of the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew throwing a net into the water, for they fished for a living. Jesus called out to them, "Come, follow me, and I will show you how to fish for people." And they left their nets at once and followed him. A little farther up the shore, Jesus saw Zebedee's sons, James and John, in a boat repairing their nets. He called them at once, and they also followed him, leaving their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired men. Then in Mark chapter 2, verses 13 to 17, it says this. Then Jesus went out to the lakeshore again, and taught the crowds that were coming to him. As he walked along, he saw Levi's son Alphaeus, sitting at his tax collector's booth. "Follow me and be my disciple," Jesus said to him. So Levi got up and followed him. Later, Levi invited Jesus and his disciples to his home as dinner guests, along with many tax collectors and other disreputable sinners. There were many people of this kind among Jesus' followers. But when the teachers of religious law, who were Pharisees, saw him eating with tax collectors and other sinners, they asked his disciples, "Why does he eat with such scum?" When Jesus heard this, he told them, "Healthy people don't need a doctor. Sick people do. I have come to call not those who think that they are righteous, but those who know they are sinners." We looked at that passage a little bit a few weeks ago. But take another look now at verse 15. Jesus and his disciples were invited over for dinner at the home of a hated tax collector, along with other tax collectors and disreputable sinners. And then in brackets, kind of like it's being said under your breath so that no one takes too much notice. It says, there were many people of this kind among Jesus' followers. It's kind of like the author is having a hard time with this idea that Jesus was associating himself openly with this kind. See, I would have started with the leaders of the day, the rich and famous, specifically the well-educated and the powerful and influential, maybe the political leaders or the religious leaders. If I want to change the world's relationship with God, I need to get those who know most about God on my side. That way people will respect what I'm doing and we can gain some traction. But not Jesus. It's almost like he set out to purposely offend the well-educated and powerful. It's not that he tried and failed to get the rich and powerful on his side and then had to change tactics when that didn't work. It's that he never even tried to get them on side. His first choice was to engage with the scum. That's what the Pharisees called them. That wasn't plan B, that was plan A. To assemble his team from the wretched hives of scum and villainy, you'd think he would have been more cautious. Prostitutes, the corrupt, the uneducated, the ill-tempered, the disloyal, the unattractive, the ones who smelled bad. I mean, you're already starting in a hole if your first selections to your team are some fishermen. And then Jesus just kept on digging. The pilot, Captain J. Zemer, saw potential, not only in himself, but in the other rejects that he could dig up. He figured that if he gave these people a shot, they could do something special together. Jesus saw potential in the scum, the lowest of the low, and he specifically sought them out over those that we would have naturally chosen to be part of our team. The misfits were his plan A. And that should tell us something about what God can accomplish with us. Those of us who feel unusable or relegated to the sidelines, hobbled by our lack of skill or our position in life or our guilt over past mistakes. Maybe we're the ones that God wants to use over the famous and educated and influential. Maybe we can be a part of Plan A. So here's some questions to ponder. Why did Jesus work this way? Was it because a group of misfits would be easier for him to control? Was it actually the best team that he'd be able to assemble? Was it so that they could be clear on where their eventual success had come from? Was it just to tick off the establishment and show people that he meant business? Was Jesus thinking primarily relationally in how he assembled his team, or functionally, putting the skills together to accomplish the task at hand? Is this an approach that we can afford to use? Is there anything that we need to learn from Jesus in how we value people and see their potential? Can you really bring yourself to associate with the rejects of society as your plan A, despite the cost of doing so? Or is the way that we normally do it, associating with the best people that we can, is that the better approach for us to follow? I mean, you don't expect the worst hockey players that you can find to come together and win a gold medal. So what's the takeaway here? How do you think that Jesus' mission would have gone differently if he had used a different plan? Would it have gone more smoothly? Would it have been more effective? And finally, who are the misfits and the rejects in your life? Who maybe you haven't seen the potential in? Who you would never think of partnering with to accomplish something, or even have a relationship with because they are that kind? Is it worth your while to reconsider that position?